I take a lot of the inspiration from the businessy side of our organization, marketing, product, sales. A lot of the metrics that I really love to use related to our investment in people is really seeing people operations as a product.
Hello and welcome to the All Onboard podcast, your go-to resource for all things related to employee onboarding. I'm your host, Thomas Kunjappu, founder and CEO of Cleary. And today we are excited to have Yuyan Sun, the head of people analytics at Motiv, joining us. Yuyan brings extensive experience in transforming HR metrics and numbers and analytics into actionable insights for the entire employee lifecycle. And we're excited to talk specifically about how it relates to onboarding today. Welcome to the show, Yuyan.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And so let's get started with your high-level approach to building out an onboarding program, especially with a people analytics background.
Yeah, so I think with my people analytics background, one thing I really love is that it empowers the HR function. Traditionally, back at the house, more operational driven, to have the data that they need, the voice and the respect at the business. For the longest times in the history of HR, we struggled with doing that because I think what it comes down to is that HR is a cost center. We don't generate revenue. So when you go into that executive team meeting, instead of talking about the very exciting things that all executives love to talk about, which is growth, we talk about spend, the money we invest in the business. I think what people analytics have enabled our HR leaders and HR functions able to do is to start talking about, start having that revenue-driven, growth-driven talk track with the business. So, I take a lot of inspiration in my line of metrics and analysis. I take a lot of the inspiration from the businessy side of our organization, marketing, product, sales. So a lot of the metrics that I really love to use related to our investment in people is really seeing people operations as a product, right? So when you're designing a product that is employees' experiences, that is the productivity of and the performance of your employees, you really are seeing your employees as your customers, right? So for example, marketing departments will usually analyze one of the key metrics they analyze is customer lifetime value, the CLTV, right? So taking inspiration from that, one of my favorite metrics is employee lifetime value, because we're designing people operations as a product. We're seeing employees as our customers. So how do we design employee experiences, workplace experiences in a way that will maximize the value our employees could bring to the organization? That is something that, that's an example of my approach of using analytics to really drive the business talk for the people function.
That's awesome. I love that concept of lifetime value in general with business and customers. And then you're talking about employee lifetime value. So maybe let's define that a little bit more closely for people. Like, what is employee lifetime value?
Right. So customer time value, for example, it really tells you for each of the customers and for the entire duration of the customer interacts with your business and, purchasing from your business, subscribing your services, like money can you make? How much revenue can you make from that particular customer account, right? When it comes to employee lifetime value, it's really the same thing. It's like, we invest in acquiring this employee, just like we invest in acquiring a customer, right? You have to invest in advertisements, your job posts, you have recruiters or recruiting agency to really represent your brand, your organization. All of that is like money you put into the process, right? Once you acquire this employee, that is to say this employee now subscribe to your business, right? And then in turn, make your business money, right? So if you really think about that, every single person at your organization should contribute to the overall revenue that you're going to make at the end of the day. Whether this person is a salesperson who directly generates revenue or is someone in HR, like a supporting function, we all contribute to that line item on your balance sheet, right? So, if you break it down, like there's a cost of acquiring employees, there's a cost of onboarding them, there's a cost of retaining your employees, right? You pay them salary, you provide benefits, healthcare, you probably invest in the ping pong games at the office, invest in office buildings to provide them a great environment to be productive, right? At the end of the day, all of that investment needs to, in turn, you want to get revenue back, right? At the end of the day, like all of the businessmen, you want a positive return on your investment. So that is kind of what ELTV analyze is like, at which point of your trial, like obviously we want that revenue to go up, our ROI in people to go up, but at which point it maximizes, right? So typically what we see in the data is that at the time of acquisition of the employees, it's pure investment, right? At the time of onboarding, typically a 3-month process, usually you don't expect this employee to generate a substantial amount of revenue. Still, you're investing in this employee to get familiar with the flow of the work, get warmed up, embedded in your corporate culture, get like really engaged with the type of work that you're doing, giving them exciting assignments that matches their growth and their aspiration in life. For a period of time, let's just say 3 months, you're still investing. At, certain point, 90 days, you start to seeing that return to come in, right? And what we typically see, and it's different for every business, right? But what we typically see in data is that between 1 year and 2 years is when those employees start to bring the revenue. They're not done learning, but you're starting to get positive ROI from this employee, and then you start maximizing that ROI at that 1 year to 2 year mark, right? Which is to say that if you lose an employee before that 90-day mark, you've lost money, right? So that kind of brings back to our point of the importance of our onboarding experience. If the onboarding is done really well, the employee will stay. They will stay past that 90-day mark. They will stay past that 1 year mark. They will start bringing more and more the positive return to your business. But if it's the other way around, we see a lot of early termination between 90 days, sometimes even before a month. That just means that as a business, you have lost all of your money that you spent on acquiring this candidate and onboard this employee.
So value typically for customers is calculated, it breaks down between the lifetime, meaning what is the average retention rate, or if it's a subscription model, how many months does a person stay on average, combined with the actual revenue that you generate per month. If your average, or for any employee that you're losing in the first few months, typically for any kind of business, you are actually losing money on net. And then the other side of it is the value, right? So I think you're talking about how that increases over time, but arguably the HR function specifically and everything that management and everyone's doing is trying to invest in increasing that value per employee per period, even beyond for every period in the future. Do you think the question is just about the first point you mentioned, which is how people analytics can change the conversation internally with executives, and how you're doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've seen this particular metrics being very useful in a lot of executive level or board level discussions, right? And I think even on a granular level, I always love to have an ROI analysis when I'm designing or trying to honestly, quote unquote, sell a program or a change to the business. And I think that is critical for the success of HR, like really getting fundings for something like an onboarding program or investing in something like an intranet, right? Why can't we just scramble all of that information into like 2-hour sessions, have it done with? People just have people to take their laptop and check it out, sign into everything, and like be done with. Hand it over to the manager and start the training, right? And what we bring into the conversation with something like the ELTV model is that, something like an onboarding program is not just a pure spending. It is an upfront cost. If done well, will provide you this long tail effect of a higher and higher return as the employees stay longer with your company, right? So something I usually like to call my line of work called evidence-based HR. And evidence is both the data, like the ELTV calculation, the metric, and also research. In our HR community, there have been years and years of research of what a good onboarding program look like and the effect, the impact of a good onboarding program. We have a lot of academic research data to tell because social animals. Even in this remote world, we found why people continue to want to join organizations, even during this remote environment, is that people continue to want this sense of community, even through video calls, even through Slack messages. It's something that's part of our nature because we're social animals. We came from our ancestors, are always part of our pack work. We feel the most comfortable, safe, and productive when we're in a group, right? So you're not going to get an engaged employee if you just bring this person in and throw them in a world. And it's even worse when it's remote because they're not seeing anybody. Visually, we don't get that sense of safety and community here. If you're setting that example up in the first week or so of acquiring a new employee, you're basically setting yourself up for failure. For the next year, the employees are trying to continue to find safety, productivity, and confidence in your group, right? So, with all of that time, employee could just be very productive and highly performing and bring you your revenue, start getting really positive on that employee life cycle, employee lifetime value kind of trend line, right? So that is kind of, we like to couple the real data from our organizations and, on the market, and also years of research to bring in, hey, we are a group of people that studies the psychology and human behaviors in an organizational setting. We ought to bring in that evidence, that kind of insight to something like an onboarding program is not as simple as you say, let's just get it done with as quickly as possible. Actually, the investment of a more slower paced program, giving people time to truly identify the flow of the business, to achieve that operational excellence, to get embedded in your culture is going to pay off in the long run.
Hey, it's Thomas here. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Are you curious to see how your onboarding program stacks up against the industry's best? Check out Cleary's latest onboarding assessment tool. It offers in-depth analysis and customized recommendations to enhance every aspect of your employee onboarding, from pre-boarding to company culture integration and more. Whether you're just setting up your onboarding program or you're a CHRO at a Fortune 100 company, this assessment can improve your onboarding know-how. Check it out at gocleary.com/onboarding-assessment. Again, that's gocleary.com/onboarding-assessment. You can also find the link in the episode notes. Now back to the show. That's fascinating. So you're talking about measuring the employee experience within your organization as part of the evidence. And then the other part is broader studies and the understanding in the field. For listeners out there and companies that maybe are a bit smaller, people analytics expertise isn't often the first or hire. And you might not have that. What are, for both of those sides, if you're just starting up some simple measurement for the broader employee experience, but also specifically ELTV or onboarding program, what would you point to for folks who are trying to measure something for the first time within their organizations? And then for that same context, what are some resources or kinds of things that you've leaned on that would be useful to bring into the context of the organization as you're making an evidence-based case to invest in, for example, onboarding?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you're a smaller organization, you're probably thinking about what we've been seeing a lot is the companies start to really structure, having a more formalized and structured onboarding program when they reach a certain scale. And that scale, contrary to a lot of what people think, you don't need a formal onboarding program until you're 500 people. We've seen that being changed in the industry, right? We've seen more and more smaller companies that are 25 people, 50 people on a growth trajectory now wanted to formalize their onboarding program, because once you have 25 people, 40 people, you start really to have a corporate organizational culture, because you start forming subgroups and pockets of employees, and the culture started really forming, where I think at this point, before we even stand up a program, at that point of change and the scale of our organization, is really important for HR to come in and to say, is this the culture that we want? Are we on the right track are we seeing a good starting point for a culture that is going to outlive the people who are here right now, right? So I think and the answer to that question is going to inform the whys behind your, onboarding program and all of the HR programs that you will want to shape in the future, right? The why could be very different for all of the organizations, why you want to have an onboarding program. But generally, there are two things that we want to hit. One is this, operational excellence, right? Once your organization start to scale, you start to have operational processes to guide your employees to do certain things. This is how you receive your laptop. This is how you set up your account. Here are the resources that you need to look into to find your benefits and your insurance stuff to get your invitations for the work you need to do. So operational excellence, the way our organization is working, the communication are flowing throughout the organization, the people in the organization, to help the newcomers to understand that as efficiently as possible. I think that's generally one purpose of the onboarding program, right? And another purpose, and one that I think new employees should invest more of their attention and energy on, is this cultural embeddedness. Hey, this is my group of people. I love the vibe here, right? That kind of feeling is a very strong indicator for the future engagement and performance of this employee, right? We've seen the past where, the recruiters in the acquisition of employees, like they really sell the culture of the company. Like, you're going to vibe so hard here. You're going to love everyone here. Everyone's so supportive. And then they come in and they're kind of like left on limbo. Nobody's taking care of them. Nobody's welcoming them in the group. You're basically given an HR checklist to go by, and you're left out on your own to figure things out with a bunch of people that you don't know. Going back to my earlier point, we're a social animal, and immediately when we're thrown into a new environment, we want to feel welcomed and accepted by this group, right? So what we see is that cultural recognition and embeddedness is a strong indicator of future engagement performance. And the opposite of that, if you don't feel belong, strong negative indicator that you're going to attrit very quickly within a year or so from the organization, right? So I really do think that cultural component is a hugely important part of the onboarding program, and one that I think usually get unnoticed and kind of undesigned, right? I would love to encourage, whether you already have a somewhat onboarding program or you're just to start to design one, to really figure out how you want to design the program around the cultural recognition and cultural embeddedness to make the employee feel welcome, recognized, and belong to the organization, right? So you asked me earlier about how to measure the outcome. Once you identify the outcomes that you want to drive from your program, you want people to operate very efficiently, find out all the information they need without too much hustle, right? And you want people to feel like they belong to your culture. For example, you might have other outcomes that you want to drive, but if you don't have a lot of resources and you are just one person designing an entire onboarding program, which we see a lot in small organizations, I would encourage you to just collect self-reported data throughout the process. Oftentimes what we see is like survey is actually widely in the onboarding, but it's done in very simplified ways. Usually, I personally gone through quite a few onboarding processes myself where I was basically asked to give a thumbs up, thumbs down at the end of the program. So usually I would like to advise, kind of the program managers of onboarding teams who kind of in charge of the data collection process to design at least 3 surveys. One is at the end of the onboarding program, you can ask people how they feel going through the onboarding. And then another one at the 30 days period, another one at the 60-day period. 30 days, that's if you feel like there are certain marks that your employees are supposed to hit. At that point, they're really supposed to fully understand where to find the information and start having a very healthy working relationship with their colleagues and their managers, right, for example. And by the 60 days mark, I like to assess whether employees feel as though that they could contribute to the success of the organization. You've been here 2 months, you kind of understand the lay of the land, you understand the work that is kind of cut out for you. Do you have a pretty clear idea? This is a place that you can contribute and grow for the long term. So I think at least that I would set out the 3 set of surveys. I might even have even say like the onboarding program is like a 1 week long, I would even have like another like mini survey in the middle of it, understanding the value of these information and not feeling overwhelmed and not having any problem that's impeding them from going through the next few days. So self-reported information, I think, are hugely valuable if you don't have a lot of analytics resources in general to help you do that. Surveys are pretty easy to set up. It's very easy to find free survey tools and resources to help you do that. So yeah, I would highly recommend that to smaller teams.
Got it. So a day 5, day 30, day 60, and depending on how in-depth and how much time you're asking of the new employee in the first week, maybe there's a day 2 or day 3 version of it as well. And then you did mention how it seems like the broader research points you pretty universally to basically saying we should be really investing more in the cultural experience and the connection to how the whole company works together. So that's probably blanket advice, sounds like, for any company, right? And just making sure that even if you don't
Yeah.
have your own data, that confirms or denies that. But
Yeah.
then I'd imagine that for these types of surveys, within enough time and enough data, of course, you're looking to correlate it and getting back to that employee lifetime value. What kind of measures are actually correlating there? And you said something fascinating that it sounds like in your experience, the self-reported data, even after 1 week, can highly correlate to ultimately, I guess, employee lifetime value.
Yes, absolutely. So what we found, like what I would encourage or advise onboarding teams in terms of what to survey in those day 5, day 30, day 60 touch points is this cultural embeddedness, right? And from the research that we've seen, like culture is not something that you hold on. Culture happens literally from day one. Like actually culture happens during the candidate process, the hiring process, right? What really could negatively impact the forming of the culture is that disconnection of the culture points, right? Sometimes candidates can have such a blast with the recruiting team, right? And then as soon as they sign the offer, the team kind of their support system disappeared and they're thrown in this new environment without much support. That disconnection is more harmful than never having a culture at all. Once you start forming that culture from day one, the onboarding program is the first touch point. And every new employee walk into this onboarding program having the expectation that they will be accepted by this new group that they are walking into, right? You are really starting to form the culture. So it only makes sense that you continue to survey and ask employees how much are they recognizing the brand, recognizing the culture, feeling that they belong to this group. We see that sense of belonging, what we call a honeymoon period, right? Usually we say the first 3 months is a honeymoon period. Like this is really where the sense of belonging is forming. Once you have that sense of belonging, it doesn't really go away very quickly unless something dramatic happens, like a layoff. It could happen, right? That's another topic we'll talk about another day. Layoff really hurts employee morale and employee engagement for that reason. But unless something dramatic happens, once you form that sense of belonging, you really feel that you belong. I think we can all feel like that with our friend groups, right? This is my friend, it's my bro. They could be terrible to me some days, but I'll forgive them because I know who they are. I know they're a nice person to the core, right? The same kind of psychological movements we want to create during this initial program is that you want your employees to feel like they're accepted into this group. They generally enjoy the company of their new colleagues. They generally can have a long-term future at this organization. And once you do that, nothing can take away that feeling very easily. I think it's really important to survey the employees to get a sense of how they're forming on the trajectory of cultural embeddedness with your organization.
Yeah, so you're saying a couple of things. Help me straighten this out because this is always fascinating for me. We talked about the concept of a honeymoon period, right? And typically, I mean, there could be different ranges depending on the role in the company. But let's say it's like a few weeks to a few months, right? So typically, well, I don't know, if the recruiting process is at least okay and there's some like alignment about what the company is and what the skill sets of the person are, typically, things are all great. So often I've seen it's maybe a few months after that initial honeymoon period when things start to potentially go off the rails if you don't have a good process or good management or structures in place. But then what you're saying, actually, you might see the evidence as early as 5 days in that things are headed that way. So help me connect those two thoughts, right? That there could be a honeymoon period that could be several months long, but you might actually have leading indicators if you survey properly within a week that things actually maybe in this particular case are not going well.
Yeah. So I have a theory that the honeymoon period is actually a myth, right? The reason why I think honeymoon period is a myth is actually because I believe that for the most part, we're not setting the right expectation during the first few months of work, right? And when I say right expectation, is not that you don't give hard assignment to the employees. You don't expose the employees to the tricky parts of your organization, right? I think that if we do it correctly, we have a strong culture, we're confident about our culture, you would ideally expose your newer employees to the things that may or may not be all rainbow and sunshine in the initial few months. I think there is a honeymoon period from the employees' perspective. They haven't gotten the aperture, or they're not under a lot of pressure for delivering for something that is a hard timeline. So they feel like it's all very easy. They're being given pretty simple tasks, and they're not getting involved in the political struggles of the company. The managers are generally very happy about their performances because the bar is not that high at the time. What we're trying to educate our managers now in our organization is that the onboarding period is actually a great time to give the employees a very realistic sense of what work and performance management look like at the organization. When we're talking about culture embeddedness, it's not really just about showing employees how friendly and supportive and welcome we are. That's a part of it. There's also a very pragmatic side of being employed, is that you are expected to bring the organization money at some point, right? And that means we will manage your performance. That means that you will have feedback conversations. That means that your work will be judged and even criticized at some point. It means that you will need to handle difficult stakeholders. Onboarding is not an HR-driven process. It is a partnership between HR and employees themselves, and manager play such a critical role during onboarding, right? Managers help employees get what they need, get them warmed up to the organization. Yes, it is a big part of it, but I think a big part of their role is also to set employees up for success in the future, right? We talk about having feedback conversations during the first 90 days. Formally, hey, here's your expectation I have you for the 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days period. And those expectations shouldn't be extremely high, shouldn't be as high as an onboarded employee. But setting those rhythm up and start having that feedback conversation, start bringing them into tiering out your expectations for the first 90 days and start bringing them into more and more complex projects, assignment, exposing them to the way of working in the organization, the complex relationships, and some of the more higher end partnerships that they need to be in the future. Right in the beginning, during the onboarding, managers do a bit of hand-holding, assisting, and setting the directions, but it does not mean taking away from the employee's supposed responsibilities, right? So I think from the HR's perspective, guiding the managers to do the right thing and hold them accountable during this 90 days period, in more than a few cases where when managers actually do that, the employees are like, wow, it's actually more challenging of a job than I thought. That is good. If you think now is challenging, wait until we turn it to 10. Right? When we turn it up. If you're thinking it's challenging, that you and the manager, you need to have a fair and transparent conversation to say, maybe we brought you in at the wrong level. Maybe this work is not for you. I think that is actually better at having the employees go through a supposed honeymoon period and only to find out we suddenly got turned up to 10 and I'm burned out. I can't handle it anymore. This is nothing like what I've seen during my early tenure.
This is fascinating because there's some juxtaposing concepts here, right? Because earlier in the conversation, you and I were talking about how it's important as human beings, and especially with remote work, if you want to retain talent, you want people to connect to the mission in the company, but specifically to other people. I need to give them these moments to teach them how that's done in this company and to have them feel welcome as a human being into the organization. And yet, you can't just throw a party, right, where the actual job comes in month 4, which often is the criticism for onboarding programs in general, which is like, let's throw them to the managers and then get them to be as productive as quickly as possible. But there is value to having a structured onboarding program. But it sounds like what you're saying is it needs to be welcoming, but it also has to be realistic. And it can't be just show the best aspects of the job and the organization and everything, because then that is actually, you accepted the offer, and then the job in earnest is actually, and the first ask from the managers is until much, much later. And so that actually isn't that helpful. You're discovering that there's misalignment in the talent and the expectation of the organization in month 4 instead of in week 1, which you could have done with a different process. Now, of course, ideally, it all happens in the interview process and you understand exactly where you're at, but there are so many nuances to any role and any company that you want to start bringing that in as quickly as possible in the onboarding process. Is because you mentioned how important managers and, at some scale, departmental onboarding, or basically the operations in a department, whether it's, support or sales or marketing or technicians, whatever department where they're transferring real skill sets, is a part of the onboarding as much as the cultural centralized kind of onboarding. What is the responsibility, right, between managers and departments versus HR in making this thing happen holistically so that hopefully the ELTV is as high as possible?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think our HR's role is, once there's like a more formal kind of 1 week or anywhere between like 2 to 5 days of a program where we cramp a lot of content together. It's the operational side of things. It's also the culture side of things. Usually the HR team is in charge of like building that. And after that is more of that, hey, let's ship this employee to the managers and have them handle them. And I think during this part, HR need to take a very challenging but also important work, which is the enabler role, right? Because I think it's a very tricky and specialized skill set to effectively onboard a new employee, right? HRBPs, for example, they are the people consultants of the business, right? And they usually consult on things like performance issues or potential exits or organizational design or something like that. But I think it takes just as much as a specialized knowledge from an HR consultant to help a manager effectively bring someone on board, especially thinking about the pivotal moment of onboarding for a new employee, right? Like for all of the reasons that this is a few months of golden time for us to set things right for the next 2 years of ELTV, right? So I think HR has to play a very competent enabler role for the managers, and the managers need to hold themselves accountable for doing the right things for their employees, right? Personally, for me, it means making sure the team welcome the new employee, making sure that the employee is embedded in the Slack channels, the meetings, right? Like make sure that the new employees are integrated into the flow of the operation of your team, right? Setting clear and realistic expectations for 30, 60, 90 days, having a weekly or twice a week one-on-one with your new employees to checking on how they're feeling, giving them guidances on how to do certain things, providing a reassurance that it's okay to make a mistake, and asking questions during this period of time, right? Providing you clear expectations and realistic expectations. Work might be hard, but this is the time where you can more freely make mistakes, and we will work to help you grow as quickly as we can during this period, right? You first need to really care about this person and bringing, and also skill sets and time investment into this whole process. So for managers, for type of accountability and making sure that they set aside the time for the new hires to actually help them and be supportive of them in the right way, that is hugely important. What I've seen sometimes when I need to coach my HRBP head on and coach managers, this is a resource that you've got. I know you fought hard for this resource. I know you couldn't wait for them to come in. I knew you needed this person yesterday, but give this person another 3 months of time the investment during this few months is going to give you much higher return in the next 1 and 2 and 3 years.
Hey, it's Thomas here. Now, you and I might think it's obvious that people are your biggest resource and investing in your onboarding program to make it world-class is a bet you want to make. But how do you talk about this with your CEO or CFO so that you can get them on board with investing in an updated onboarding program? They're always looking for something that can save money and boost productivity at the same time. Well, I've got something exciting for you. Check out Cleary's Onboarding ROI Calculator. It's easy to use. Just enter some info about your current onboarding process and your company and see how much time and money you could be saving with a modern onboarding solution. Head on over to gocleary.com/onboarding-ROI to give it a try. See what you learn and let us know what you think. Again, that's gocleary.com/onboarding-ROI. You can also find a link in the episode notes. Now, back to the show. You need everyone, including managers, to have that longer term outlook. Sometimes you get there through pain, through not investing heavily, whether it's on the HR side, the manager side, or the department side, and then seeing it in the numbers or seeing it in just you have that same resource need 3 months down the line. Do you have any examples of successes or failures or anything you'd like to share about onboarding nightmare stories or programs or ideas that feel like worked?
I think I can definitely think of some really successful stories without naming the companies. I think the ones that are successful give the employees real kind of outcomes that we want to drive. I think it's really important to provide that kind of psychological safety during this initial period of time. There's still a lot of debate on whether we could really effectively create that sense of belonging, that kind of psychological safety in a remote environment through group video calls. Right? Personally, I think there definitely is. As humans, we're highly adaptable animals. We would be able to still feel like we belong to a group even without personally meeting and hugging each other. Okay? A lot of times we hear negative feedback for employees logging into that group Zoom call and feel as if they're just provided information or checklist that they need to go through, or they really liked having casual conversations. Other new hires in the same class, but once they turn off that video, that sense of belonging and that sense of activity just immediately taken away from you. So that is not great. I think we as an organization, we're still trying to figure that out, how to do it remotely. I have seen some organizations, and now that the world is opening up and hybrid work is becoming a new norm, I have seen a lot of companies who are either on-site or hybrid, or even the fully remote companies utilize their office spaces, hubs to conduct new hire orientation in person. They will be able to plan for a broader set of activities for the new hires, right? So I think, investment in creating the culture has created a lot of successes. And another thing is the investment in the operations of the onboarding, right? If you want your new hires to invest, it is an overwhelming process. The onboarding is overwhelming. But if you want your new hires to invest their energy into getting embedded in the culture, getting immersed in your group, you want to make the operation side as easy as possible. You want to take away the cognitive load that is required for new hires to find out where to get their software, how to get access to certain things, how to communicate to their colleagues, where to find that documentation of their work. You want to make it centralized, very simple, one-stop shop to get all of the information done. If the employees feel as if they could, no-brainer, they could just do this, all of the things on the checklist very easily, they will invest more of that energy into interacting with their teams, into recognizing and really reflecting on the culture of this new organization, rather than just getting busy with signing up for new insurance and benefits,
I get that. Wow. So there's so many different topics we covered. Before I let you go, Yuyan, I'd love to do a lightning round set of questions. Are we ready to go?
Cool.
All right. We're going to do this real fast. Let's start with, what's your favorite color?
Black.
Oh, I like that one. If you're going to travel anywhere in the world now, where would you go?
Portugal.
If you weren't working in HR, what would you be doing instead?
Oh, that's a hard question because there are so many things I want to do. I think probably a farmer.
What would you be growing?
Probably be having like animals like chicken and pigs and cows.
Okay, that sounds very idyllic. Let me ask you this. So what's a great piece of advice that you've had at some point in your career that's really stuck with you?
This one always come out when I'm at my lowest time at work or in life in general, which is you don't learn anything from the things that feels easy to you. You don't grow from easy tasks. You have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So if you feel like this is damn hard, this is impossible, it means you're growing. And the pain is from stretching your wings. So I think it's the best piece of advice that I picked up.
That's a great mindset. What about your current role? Or what about your role do you enjoy the most?
My favorite part of my role is to be able to influence changes in the organization. In my LinkedIn headline, I says from data to change because I feel like my role does not stop when that flashy dashboard goes out to the business. The ultimate reward of my role is through the insights that I create from my team, from my spreadsheets, from my dashboard. I'm able to change mindset, change culture, change people so that organizational changes could happen. Employees could have better experience. Companies can make more money because employees are able to perform better and feel, in general, more fulfilled in their lives. And then that has been what motivates me to get up and do my job every day.
So that's a wrap for today's episode of All on Board. I hope you found our conversation with Yuyan today as insightful and valuable to your onboarding efforts as I did. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated with the latest tips on employee onboarding. And stay tuned for Thomas's Take, where I'll share my thoughts and reactions in near real time. Until next time, best of luck to everyone with your onboarding processes. And remember, it's all about making every new hire feeling welcome. Thank you again, Yuyan.
Thank you, Thomas. A great time chatting with you. And thank you for listening to us.
Hey, it's Thomas here. Welcome to the Thomas's Take portion of the show where I share a take or two about the discussion from this week's episode. Let's talk evidence-based HR and this concept of ELTV. Now, a people analytics department or even a person can help transform the HR function from being thought of as a cost center to an investment center. Evidence-based HR is helpful. Anytime you make a statement or have an ask for your colleagues for a new program, ask yourself, how do I know this helps? This question helps because the question that's being asked by your audience is very similar. They're saying, how do you know? So small teams of one, even in HR, can and should be thinking this way. Leveraging research as you're making a case, you can start measuring the employee experience bit by bit to get to a higher fidelity answer to the how do I know question about any particular program, of course, including onboarding. Now, the second concept we wanted to talk about a little bit was the concept of employee lifetime value that was discussed here in this episode. I think it's super powerful. Now, you're already ahead of most if you're thinking actively about just employee retention. It makes sense on a conceptual level, of course. Everyone wants to improve employee retention. Who wouldn't? But how much do you want to improve employee retention? That's where ELTV comes in. If we believe in this model, we should be investing more upfront. It's the same thing with investing in your onboarding program. And the concept of ELTV helps you transform these conversations into a conversation about value. You're conceptually aligning on, as an organization, how valuable employees are. The metaphor is something that the C-suite should be able to understand directly, as many of them are focused on driving revenue and driving growth as a core part of their day job and have a similar model in mind. See you on the next one.